This meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin homelands. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Algonquin nations for their stewardship of these lands. I would now like to ask if anyone has an interest to declare to please do so now. I am seeing none, so I'm now going to call for a mover to approve the agenda. Trustee Kaplan-Murth, does anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. I'm now going to move on to the briefing from the chair of the board. Chair Scott, can you please provide your briefing?
I would be happy to provide my briefing, but I'm having a technological issue right at the moment. So perhaps if you go to the director's briefing and then come back to me, please.
So we're going to move to the director's briefing and then back to the briefing from the chair of the board. Director, can you please provide your briefing?
Certainly. Through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. I would like to begin my briefing with some exciting news. The OCDSB will be launching its redesigned district and school websites and a new staff portal on the 31st of January 2025. The new websites will offer students, staff, parents, guardians, and caregivers, as well as the broader community, a modern, user-friendly digital experience that makes it easier to access important information and stay connected with the OCDSB. With a fresh new look and enhanced search capabilities, the updated websites are built to provide a seamless and accessible experience across all devices. Look forward to that coming out at month's end. Next, I would like to highlight a few important upcoming dates. First of all, the cross-boundary transfer application period is from January 27th to February 7th. Families wishing to have students attend a school other than their designated one must complete the transfer application. Please ensure that your child is registered at their designated school prior to requesting a transfer. The Middle French Immersion registration period is February 3rd to February 7th of 2025. Families interested in registering their child for Middle French Immersion program in grade 4 can use the school locator on our website to find the MFI school in their area and contact that school. You can also contact your child's current school for more information. The Winter Night School registration is also open until February 13th. These courses are an excellent opportunity for students to upgrade their courses or take new courses that are not available at their home school, as well as for adult learners working towards their Ontario Secondary School Diploma or upgrading on their existing courses. More details are available on our website. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Director. I do have a speakers list started, so Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Director. I have a quick question about the new OCDSB website. Thank you for letting us know that that's going to launch. Currently, the website for OCDSB includes a link to X. And so I'm asking again, as I've asked before, do we have a commitment to removing X given current politics from our website?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. I'll turn this question over to General Manager Pernari on our behalf.
At this current time, we're still intending to keep X because it's the only way we have of monitoring X. With the changes in the rules on 2023, we can't monitor anything if we don't have an account. So it's difficult for us to monitor situations that are taking place, even posts from OPS when we're dealing with incidents. So at the time being, we will be keeping the X account, but we don't use it for anything outside of alerts and just monitoring.
Thank you for that, but people are increasingly concerned with the social network X, given Elon Musk, his recent Heil Hitler salute. I think that it would be incumbent on us to do more than just saying that we need to keep it to monitor, because right now on the OCDSB website, there is an active link to X and OCDSB's X account. That is quite different from just keeping our account so that we can monitor how people are referring to OCDSB. So I would ask again that we determine a policy in terms of which factors we allow to, I suppose, factor into our decision to maintain X.
Through you, Madam Chair, thanks Trustee Kaplan-Murphy for the concern and the query raised. As we transition to the new website, we'll take a look at some of that. And there may be a difference between our monitoring of some accounts versus what's a link that's visibly available on the website. So duly noted, we'll take that back. And I know General Manager Pernari and I will take the feedback and take it into consideration. I appreciate the comments made.
All right, I am seeing no other questions for the director. So Chair Scott, are you ready to provide your briefing?
Yes, I am ready to provide my briefing. Good evening. I recently presented to the Provincial Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs in Ottawa during their pre-budget consultations. This presentation was an part of the OCDSB's efforts to advocate for fair funding for public education in the 2025 Ontario budget. I spoke about the increased supports required for student success and well-being, and also highlighted the urgent need for a funding increase to address the real costs of meeting students' needs in today's schools, especially for replacement workers, special education, and the impact of inflation. Secondly, the final evaluation period for secondary students in semestered schools is scheduled from January 24th to January 30th. During this period, all students are expected to attend their scheduled final evaluations. These evaluations are an important opportunity for students to demonstrate their learning and understanding of the course material. A reminder to families to avoid any scheduling conflicts during this evaluation period. More information will be shared by each of the schools. Next, Learning Support Services, LSS, are hosting weekly question and answer sessions for parents, caregivers, and youth with intellectual disabilities to support students in navigating life after high school. The next session will be on January 28th. Details are available on the OCDSB website. And last, a reminder that this Friday, January the 24th, is a PA day for OCDSB elementary schools. There will be no school for elementary students, and early on centers will also be closed. That should have been ending my briefing, but this evening I am going to add one additional note, because it saddened me greatly to learn earlier this week that former Ottawa Board of Education trustee Jane Dobell has passed away. She was elected initially to the Rockcliffe Park Public School Board in 1966. And 3 years later, when the Ottawa area school boards were amalgamated to form the Ottawa Board on the one hand and the Carleton Board on the other, she was elected to the Ottawa Board of Education in December 1969 for a term beginning the 1st of January 1969. And she served on that board until November 1994, when she was elected to the Rockcliffe Park Village Council instead. During her time on the Ottawa Board of Education, she brought many things to the forefront, particularly the beginning of French immersion programming in Ottawa public schools. She leaves a tremendous legacy for all of us to remember. She didn't make a lot of everything she did, but she was a very determined person. And I was acquainted with her when I first became a trustee, and she was certainly a force of nature when it came to wanting really good programming for students attending public schools. She leaves a tremendous legacy, and I think we should all be grateful for her contributions, which this board continues to honor. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair Scott. I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing no questions for the chair. So we have no delegations tonight, so we're going to be moving on to item 8, reports from statutory and other committees. I would now like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Advisory Committee on ACE dated May 30th, 2024. Trustee Kaplan-Murphy, are there any errors or omissions to this report? Seeing none, I am now going to call a vote to receive the report. All those in favor? And that carries. I will now move on to item 8.2, and I'm going to call for a mover to receive the report of the Advisory Committee on Equity dated September 26, 2024. Trustee Dixon, are there any errors or omissions to this report? I am seeing none, so I'm now going to call the vote to receive the report. All those in favor? And that carries. I am now moving on to item 8.3, and I am calling for a mover to receive the report from the Parent Involvement Committee dated November 20th, 2024. Trustee Nash, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'm now going to call the vote to receive the report. All those in favor? And that carries. And now we're moving on to matters for action, item 9.1. I'm now going to call upon the director to introduce report 25-002, elementary program review, proposed model and school support.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, it's a pleasure this evening to speak to the Board of Trustees regarding the comprehensive report in front of you that brings forward a proposed program model and associated supports for students at the elementary level. I want to begin by thanking Associate Directors Reynolds and Gerrois from an academic and business perspective on the work that's been put together in bringing this program model forward, and also the elementary program review project team led by Superintendent Nadia Toage. The purpose of this evening's conversation is to provide an overview of that model. I won't go through the report in its entirety, but just highlight a few key points. I know what's most important here is the questions and the conversation that we have herein, but do want to share as well that we're looking as staff for approval of a consultation plan related to bringing the model forward to our interest holders, our students, our staff, parents, caregivers, guardians, as well as community members on the proposed model and supports for students. When I rejoined as an honor the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board on the 1st of August of 2023, it was shut down period. The very first report I read was the strategic plan consultation report. It was glorious. I was here on my own. I could read a full report without interruption. But what was within that report was a strong commitment to improving program quality and accessibility. And one of the key themes in that report, and you'll see it linked from 2023-029, was the fact that there were a number of concerns expressed from interest holders regarding difficulty accessing programs, particularly French immersion at community schools, and inconsistent support for special education across the programs offered. That led to, on my in-boarding and onboarding conversations with members of the Board of Trustees and senior staff, the envisioning of a vision exercise with 4 parts. Elementary programming was the priority across the board for members of the senior team and Board of Trustees, but there are 3 other elements to that eventually we'll look to engage the district in. That includes early years and childcare services, and adult and continuing education on the bookends, and of course, secondary programming therein. Very briefly, the district offers a variety of programs. I know everyone's well aware, from the bilingual 50-50 kindergarten program to English with Core French, 2 French immersion programs, early and middle, and of course, an alternative program at 5 sites where an approach is delivered based on 7 tenants. This has represented for the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board and its predecessor boards in the Ottawa Board of Education and Carleton Board of Education, really a patchwork of not only delivery models and programs, but also school configurations over the past quarter century. You'll note in the report on the second page in and through items 4, 5, and 6, some context for consideration, including 3 key points: public consultation last spring, a review of district data and relevant research over the summertime, and then a return to our advisory bodies over the fall season for additional input. And you'll note within item 5 a few of the highlights in the summaries of our external researchers in the area of dynamic bilingualism and inclusive education that I won't go through the key highlights, but they are there for you as context from those important attachments of previous reports. I'll also note very, very briefly a few other important points. The district's understanding and intentionality and respecting and looking at any changes that might occur to our existing policies as a district, to the pupil accommodation review guideline from a ministerial or provincial perspective, and last but not least, for the provision of French immersion, which is a ministerial opportunity and approval that's required. And I did want to highlight that those are all part of the context of staff's look at elementary programming. In key considerations, there were a number of guiding principles that were shared in the preliminary report last April. There were three that have really emerged as overarching principles: the importance of community-based education, the recognition of each school site as core to the community, allowing for the localization of programs and/or services related to learning, well-being, and social responsibility, as well as the effective and efficient operationalization of the organization as a system. Dynamic bilingual teaching and learning environments, the ability to offer programming in English and French for all of our students at each school site, along a continuum of bilingualism, organized by subject area discipline, allowing for confidence, proficiency, and achievement in both of the country's official languages. And third, a continuum of inclusion, the provision of support at each school site, allowing for an array of assistance for our students, including multilingual learners and those with special needs, with the potential for full inclusion, withdrawal assistance, and/or specialized program classes. I do want to share that the work of the program review is also guided by the Algonquin protocols, emphasizing the importance of respectful dialogue, active listening, open-mindedness, as well as diverse perspectives. These protocols encourage all of us as individuals to engage in discourse thoughtfully, support arguments with evidence, and maintain a spirit of both collaboration and inclusivity. The proposed program model, and I'll only highlight a few key points and then happy to answer questions, consolidates existing program offerings to provide two program pathways for elementary students in grades 1 to 8, enhanced English and French immersion. Of importance to note, both pathways offer varying degrees of English and French as languages of instructions, and the benefits of a more streamlined and robust program offering at elementary sites will allow us to improve program quality and accessibility for all of our students, and to focus our resources, human, financial, capital, more efficiently and effectively system-wide. And that is a topic at just about every one of our board meetings, committee of the whole or board. Under the proposed model, kindergarten students will continue to be offered a 50-50 bilingual program upon entering grade 1. Students can enroll in either the enhanced English or French immersion programs. The entry point to the French immersion program will be fluid in the proposal, such that students will be able to access that program at a start of any of either grades 1, 2, or 3. Of note, entry beyond grade 3 may be approved on a case-by-case basis. For example, a student moving into the district in grade 4 who may have come from a French language school board. There are exceptions to our fluid entry in the primary grades. Those decisions would be made at the school level, applying centrally developed criteria. As part of the proposed model, the French immersion program will include more instruction in English at grade 1 from that which is currently in place. This means 2 subject areas, English language arts and mathematics, will be taught in English beginning at grade 1. We do this already in math. It would be new in grade 1 for English language arts. As well, the amount of French instruction in the enhanced English program will increase from the current 200 minutes per week to 240 minutes per week. There is a chart on page 7 of the report that provides all of what's currently placed and the changes with respect to the program offerings. Important to note, under the proposed model, the current MFI program would be discontinued for new enrollment as of 2026, and that the proposed model also means the discontinuation of the alternative approach as a distinct and separate offering within the district. The rationale for the reduction from 4 programs to 2 are twofold. With respect to English programming, it's become apparent to staff, and I think to school communities, that many of the tenants, innovative in nature in their initial envisioning as alternative programming have become commonplace across the district. Multi-age grouping, parental engagement and involvement, and, as well as a number of other tenets, so that the district can consolidate those programs to be able to offer our services more effectively and efficiently. With respect to middle French immersion, we've come to realize as staff that the vast majority of those students are our own students who missed a hard entry point in grade 1 and have been waiting through grades 2 and 3 to get to grade 4 to enter French immersion. By allowing a fluid entry point for French immersion and consolidating those two programs en français into one, we can again allow for a greater efficiency and effectiveness as an organization, which is so important in the context today of making sure we meet the needs of students the best that we possibly can. Supports for students allow for or are grounded in inclusive education practices, ensuring that individual student learning needs are understood and a responsive plan is established. The existing structure for serving multilingual learners in the district has been in place for over 10 years, and relevant research continues to show that the provision of intensive targeted support for these learners can accelerate their learning trajectory and facilitate their successful integration into general classrooms. We're looking to continue to provide supports for ESL and ELD that are intensive, targeted, and timely, so that we can have that trajectory back into the general classroom as quickly and as appropriately as we possibly can. With respect to the existing model for special education in the district, it was last reviewed in 2010. Since that time, research and best practices to support students with disability-related needs have shifted from a sorting of students based on ability to one where every student's profile is valued and can contribute to the learning environment. The focus of our work in special education will be taking services to students vis-a-vis students to services somewhere other than their community schools. The proposed model does not indicate a binary change of all in or all out with respect to special education. The vast majority of our current specialized program classes will remain in place. There are a number of carefully selected SPCs, as outlined in the chart on page 10, that are being proposed for redistribution and for supports to be available in the general classroom. We're happy to answer questions with respect to not only our work ahead for multilingual learners, for students with special needs, but I'm also very pleased to say that we're engaging an external researcher for our Indigenous learners to look at promising practices, effective strategies that can help our Indigenous students meet their needs in the classroom, and for learning of non-Indigenous students around Indigenous ways of knowing and living and learning. That is all important work in the context of the supports that accompany the model that we're proposing. Very briefly, as I move through here, I know there's a lot covered. I did want to share within the context of the brochure that the Board of Trustees have in front of them, that there are a few key areas that are representative of those three overarching principles. The first one, community-based education, streamlining our school grade configurations from 8 to 5. This will allow for greater stability as an organization, for our school grade configurations to end at a natural point of change, either at the end of primary, JK to 3, at the end of junior, JK to 6, or at the end of elementary in its entirety, JK to 8, in addition to our grades 7 to 12 and 9 to 12 configurations. Also wanted to share that our school attendance boundaries will create a greater focus on community schools. There's a second report coming to the Board of Trustees on the 4th of March that will provide greater detail around school attendance boundaries. It's not the focus of this evening's conversation, but will be forthcoming. In terms of dynamic bilingual teaching and learning environments, of course, the shift to 2 program pathways at elementary and to a focus on fluid entry points in the primary grades so that our parents, guardians, and caregivers have a little bit more time and choice as to when they would enter into a French immersion program if they were to choose that for their children or continue in the enhanced English program. The reason for that being drawn down at the primary grades, at a certain point in time, you don't accumulate enough hours in French immersion to actually be in French immersion, and therefore the last entry point there would be grade 3. Last but not least, in the brochure, the continuum of inclusion enhancement of our supports for students. We know this is a concern and a focus for our district. It will remain so. This is the work ahead of us, and it's been the work for us for really all my time in education. I can't speak for others, but I do know that this continues to be a real priority for us as a system to ensure we're serving our students the best that we can and making sure we work on inefficiencies and ineffectiveness so that we can redirect supports. And that's part of the intention, not only for our ESL, ELD classes, but for our specialized program classes, as well as the redistribution of resources to neighborhood schools for those specialized program classes where the learning trajectory is better served in the general classroom. Just to bring an introduction and conclusion, I appreciate the extra time that the chair and vice chair have afforded me this evening. There are additional considerations you'll see on pages 14 and 15. There are only two that I'll highlight, but a number of them are there, close to a dozen. The two that I want to speak to is student movement and staff movement. Each and every school year, this district moves approximately 6,000 to 8,000 students, sometimes more. Changes year to year. It is commonplace for us as an organization to move students. There's no question that there would be a significant one-time move of additional students in the proposal we're bringing forward. That displacement, dislocation is not insignificant, but it's important to balance that against the numerous benefits that would be achieved with a more equitable and accessible school system from there on for us as an organization. The second one is staff movement. There will be fairly significant staff movement for those staff currently working in elementary schools. This is also not insignificant. The movement will need to be fairly and transparently managed in partnership with our principals and vice principals, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, our Ottawa-Carleton branch, our Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, both in terms of student support professionals and education support professionals, as well as others, in collaborative working groups that take into consideration current collective agreement provisions, staffing, transfer timelines, and processes. And I want to extend my thanks to our Federation Union partners who have taken the opportunity, their time to meet with me to begin conversations around the nature of the model that is still as a proposal, but nonetheless the model that we've put forward. There are timelines for decision-making in a critical path that include the seasons ahead. The winter right now, the spring, if a decision were to be made, the summer season and into all of the upcoming school year in preparation for what would be the majority of changes for the fall of 2026. As a final 2 pages, there is a communication plan, an active community engagement campaign that lays out building awareness, engaging our advisory committees once again for their valuable input and their sage advice, student engagement, staff town halls, community meetings by zone involving our members of our Board of Trustees, as well as virtual, online engagement through the engage.ca platform, face engagement sessions for those SAIT schools that we gained so much valuable input from in the spring, and an Indigenous community engagement session or sessions that we're looking to prepare in consultation with our Indigenous Education Council and our Indigenous team. That said, I want to thank the chair for additional time for context. Looking forward to the conversation and happy to answer any questions. And I've got members, of course, of the senior team here to assist in answering any specific details. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director. And I would like to say on behalf of everyone around the table, thank you to staff, both present and at home, for all their hard work and overtime on this elementary program review, but also most importantly on the education for our students in our district. We see your hard work and we really do appreciate it. So with that said, we're going to enter the discussion tonight. Things are going to work a little bit differently this evening, so I'm just going to give a little bit of a preamble of how it's going to work. We're going to try something new, and I'm going to call on trustees in numerical order of zones to give them the opportunity to ask up to 2 questions with staff response. We're then going to enter first-time speakers from our valuable community partners around the table, and you will have up to 3 minutes to speak or ask questions with staff response, and then we're going to continue on with our regular discussion of committee of the whole, and you can raise your hand and we'll record a speakers list. So with that said, I'm going to start with Zone 1 and Trustee Scott, and if Trustee Scott also wants to move the recommendation on the floor, that would be appreciated.
I would be happy to move the recommendation on the floor, knowing that someone else will have to substitute for me when it comes to board, because this initiative certainly requires consultation. And in terms of my questions, I will preface them with a comment. This elementary program review is not something that this board suddenly came up with out of the blue. The last 2 or 3 boards, so going back at least 10 years, have looked at our existing programs and have seen that we have challenges because we have such a complexity of programs and they are not all easily accessible. And we've been doing a lot of things, but maybe we haven't been doing them as well as we could. And so when this came up again and again and again in different boards, there's no question that recognition of the need has been supported by the data that we have in-house in terms of student achievement, well-being, and access to programs and outcomes. And so my first question is, what staff think will be the biggest impact in terms of student achievement? Because we know right now we have groups that are underachieving disproportionately. And we also know that even for those who look as though they're doing just fine, my suspicion has always been they could be doing better.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think what Chair Scott's bringing forward is very important. This isn't the work we need to do. The work we need to do as an organization happens every day at the instructional core. The interplay between the student, the educator, and the task at hand, hopefully closely tied to the curriculum, and I'm confident that that is the case in our classrooms. What staff is proposing here is infrastructural changes to allow us to mobilize our resources, human, material, and fiscal, to better serve our students. It is not lost on me, and I've only been at one of them, but I've only been back at one of them. I was at plenty previously. The same concerns are coming up from interest holders in the organization around the inability to see the kind of change that's desired. This allows the organization to be more lean, to be more effective and efficient, and to redeploy resources more effectively. But it does so much more than that. It allows for a greater synergy of the work that our educators do together. It allows our school configurations to be more stable. You'll see in the report, with cohorts of students moving together rather than dispersing in an array of transitions that are unnecessary for them and for us. This plan allows us to rethink, and I agree with Chair Scott. I think there's been a lot of rethinking. I don't think we've made the decisions to actually do something about it, to allow us to be more serving of the students in front of us, and quite frankly, less complicated and over-engineered at the elementary level as an organization.
Thank you for that response. My second question relates to special education programs and services. I was heartened to see that the planned model includes a number of specialized program classes that will be retained, where typically some students with some pretty high needs are placed, and where it would be very difficult to serve some of those students in a regular classroom. In terms of the other classrooms, though, where we are moving students back to community schools, will we be having any classes which may contain a mixture of exceptionalities, as opposed to being focused on one set? Because if we have you know, one child with one particular need and another child with a similar level of need, but it's a different need, will we be able to serve those students, for example, part-time, at least in a specialized class, and part-time integrated into regular classes? What are our plans for the mix of higher needs kids who need a little more than just regular class, but not necessarily who need or should be transported across town to one specialized class just for them?
Over to Superintendent Laverne and Superintendent Stout, please.
Thanks so much for the question. And so I appreciate the wondering around how we might do something differently. So I think very broadly, right now we are looking at how we can consider supporting students in a different way within the general classroom. That being said, I think that there are important questions that we need to ask, and we need to look around the province to understand how other jurisdictions are doing it. And certainly we've started, that work has been ongoing for the last few years through some of the inclusion initiatives that we've shared both here at the table, but also within the system. And so what I would say very broadly to that is, I think that that's a really important question that is on our consideration of how we are supporting students in that continuum. So we know we will support students in their community schools, and we have been doing so with the majority of students who are identified as having a special education learning needs. We know that we will continue to have specialized program classes. What lives in the middle there, I think, is really important for us to be considering. And I think we also need to think about, when we look at the complement of students within a school, how we're supporting them there as well. And so it might be that we're looking at mixed grade groupings of students with similar learning needs who might need a targeted intervention at a specific time with specific supports. And those would be school by school and really site specific. And it really does boil down to understanding those individual learning needs and helping school staff to be able to identify the learning profiles within not only the classroom communities, but in the broader school communities, and really thinking concretely about how each of those schools can be supporting students in the best way with the resources that they have. So I guess to your question about exploring classes with mixed exceptionality groupings, I think it is something we need to continue to explore a bit more. I also think we need to be considering what it would mean for the district as a whole to be looking at if this would continue to be a fully self-contained type of program, or if we could look at partially integrated, and then of course, kind of what those withdrawal supports might look like.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Scott. Moving on to Zone 2, Trustee Forkey.
I do have a question about our proposed gradual loss of the 39 specialized classes. And I'm just wondering, outside of the report, what determining factors will drive this reduction? It's very specific classes that are being examined here. How did we determine these 39 classes?
Thanks for the question. So the 39 classes, there are different numbers of each of the 5 classes that are proposed. So for instance, we have in our general learning program junior, there are 6 general learning program classes across the district. In general, our district uses a geographic model. So when I say that, what that means is that all of our specialized program classes have classes within every region. And so it wasn't that so much that that was part of the decision, but rather we were looking at the learning profiles of the students in each of those program classes. We were looking at research. We were looking at the other jurisdictions and kind of the types of programs that are offered across the province. And so when we were making the decision, we talked with staff about what some of the concerns were around the profiles of students that were supported in different programs. And so we wanted to make sure that what we brought to the table was thoroughly thought through, but also that it was measured and it was thoughtful about how we can support a system and still have resources available to start to think about that redistribution and supporting in community schools. We do know that when resources are siloed into our specialized program classes, we would have potential to support more students if we weren't in that structure. And so being really mindful about how we are using the resources that we do have available to us and supporting the students in the best way that we can were some of the factors that went into in considering that.
Thank you. My second question, this is a very ambitious project, and I realize that the transition plan is being developed in the fall. After we make a decision on this, when would we have available to us a detailed risk analysis that we could review?
Through you, Madam Chair, both Associate Directors Reynolds and Giroir and I are beginning to think about some preliminary aspects of that. We want to be careful. It's a proposal. We understand the Board of Trustees we're hoping will approve a consultation this evening, but then consider the feedback we gather over the next couple of months. We would look somewhere around likely May or June, to bring forward beginning elements of a transition plan for consideration. And then over the course of the upcoming school year, we would bring regular reports. We envision quarterly, maybe 2 a semester, just to give the Board of Trustees an update on where transitioning is at. There's a lot of detail to the point Trustee Forty is making here, so that the Board of Trustees was informed, and so that we are getting as proactive as we can on the transition for as seamless and as smooth a change management process as we can. So beginning in May, June, and then over the course of the upcoming school year, likely quarterly.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Trustee Forty. Zone 3, Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Trustee Blackburn. Zone 4, Trustee Nash.
Yes, and thank you, and through your chair. One of the key criteria I'll be using for evaluating our new programming is how we serve our students that struggle, because I think that if we do that, we'll do everything else right. So that brings me to my first question, and actually it's a progression from Chair Scott and also Chair Julie in terms of the special needs programming, and particularly in terms of that transition that we'll see. I feel it's very important that as a trustee that I see the transitional plan before we vote on going forward, because that will be very important aspect, particularly when we look at kids with special needs. It's a varying spectrum, and in terms of, are we thinking of a very much of a tiered approach to this? I know in the plan it does put 2-3 year timelines, but could you provide some more information? And as I say, I would really want to see a transitional plan before we approve programming.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Superintendents Stout and Laverne for their commentary from a learning support and a program perspective. I will say, if the Board of Trustees is looking for some preliminary perspective on elements of transition, what we'll do as staff in what looks like our April reports is bring forward some of those elements to consider. So March being some of the detail around school boundaries, and then the April with final recommendations, we'll bring some elements of that duly noted. But I will turn it over to my colleagues just for their perspective to answer the question, I think rightly asked by Trustee Nash.
Thanks, Trustee Nash. So I think it's an important point of clarification to just be very mindful that any student that's in a currently proposed class that might be, that would be phased out, those students will be able to stay in that program until they age out of the program. And so, for instance, if there is a student who is currently in our language learning disabilities program, they would stay through the time that program would be, that they would expect to stay in the program. So we're not looking to reintegrate any students. What we're looking to do is any future students that would be going into those programs, we would be approaching that in a different way. We would be having different conversations with families and with school teams, and planning in a different way to support them within their community classrooms. So I just want to be really transparent and clear that in terms of transition planning, we're always doing transition planning. As you know, it's a big part of the work. And certainly those students that are currently in those programs, we will have a transition plan for them as they move through the next 2 to 3 years, and we look at what the plan for them as they exit the program. but there's no immediate reintegration of students. They would be able to maintain themselves in those programs.
Actually, thank you. I didn't catch that through the clarification, so thank you. My second question, and I would be remiss not to raise this, given that I have 3 alternative schools within my zone. And certainly I've been hearing for the constituents a terrible feeling of loss, or something that if that proposal does happen, that we'd be losing something very special. Can you speak to the criteria that was used to determine that this program should be stopped or discontinued?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll start, then turn it over again to Superintendents Hanna and Laverne for commentary. One of the comments I did want to make, there are a number of elements of the alternative approach that, as I said previously, staff really feel are becoming mainstays in all of our classrooms, whether they're English or French immersion from that perspective. They represent what we think is good teaching overall. The dynamic nature of multi-age groupings. I was at a school last month, just before the holiday break, that was doing just that. It wasn't an alternative site. At the same time, in all our alternative sites, we see those tenants that are good common practices happening everywhere, really shining. And what we're looking to do is honor those tenants by ensuring that we see those through in what we recommend for all of our classrooms. Parental engagement and involvement isn't isolated to 5 of our sites. It's happening everywhere. The nature of collaboration that we see in those schools. So it really is a credit to the alternative approach that we've got those tenants alive and well in all of our sites. We value our Alternative Schools Advisory Committee and the collaboration we have with them. I'll turn over to Superintendent Hanna for a comment, but all to say we really do, as a staff, want to streamline our program so that we can better serve our students. And this, much like the conversation around MFI, was a way that we can do this without losing the spirit of those tenants, seeing them not only existing in those sites, but in all of our sites. So I'll turn it over to our superintendents for additional comments.
I'll jump in before Superintendent Hanna speaks on that. And I guess where I would start is that the tenets of alternative education are brilliant. They're amazing. They do facilitate the opportunities to diversify and create differentiated learning experiences for students. When those programs were initiated, we wouldn't have seen that level of diversified learning in our schools. In the decades since that has been put in place, the learning from those schools has been applied in our other schools as well. But to that end, we don't want to just leave it that we believe that over the decades this has merged into our other schools. We are working more intentionally to make sure that we are building elements of those tenets into our professional learning and being very explicit with principals who are going to be able to be very explicit with teachers as well about what those tenets look like, so that we're moving past a theoretical concept to making sure that we are building a stronger understanding in the system of what those tenets look like within a learning environment, so that we are creating a more diversified and accessible learning environment for all of our students.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Trustee Nash, thank you for the question. A lot of the comments that have been made earlier are certainly part of the rationale, I believe, as to how the elementary program review got to this point. But certainly the tenets, as you know, are paramount really for these programs, and how rich they are in embedding all those opportunities for those curriculum connections in an interrelated way. And so that's going to be continued work that I believe with the proposed model would be infused more broadly throughout the system. Also, the parent and family and community-centered approach is also a key piece. I know that several of these schools have that as a foundation where they work closely in community with families, and that would be certainly one of the tenets that would be moving forward to support all schools, would be the plan as proposed by the committee. Thank you.
Could I make an additional follow-up? Is that?
Can you
no?
save it for the second time speaker list, please? All right, so we're gonna move on. Zone 6, sorry, I can't count. Trustee Lara.
Math is hard. If you could come back to me, I've got a bit of a diatribe, and I don't want to get on a roll without getting interrupted. So come back to me, please.
If you can raise your hand once we get to second time speakers, that would be appreciated. So Zone 7, Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. Well, certainly my colleagues have raised a number of questions that I was concerned about. Firstly, the risk assessment. Our plan is to move, in one block, 6,000 to 8,000 students, and so just considering the challenges that other large organizations in Ottawa have. When they've, in their planning, I'm thinking about the LRT, OC Transpo, and some of the challenges, I think this risk assessment really needs to focus on, what could happen if this, or what could happen if that. So I think the risk analysis is very important for trustees to have a look. I also am concerned about the 39 classes that are going to be phased out. And in the leaflet that was provided to us, it talks about over a 3-year period, over a 2-year period. So does that start in 2026? When does that phasing begin for those programs?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, just as a point of clarification, in terms of the report, and it may not have been clear enough, we are currently moving 6,000 to 8,000 students every year. Because of the patchwork of programs and school configurations we have, that's what we move annually. What we're acknowledging as staff is that there would be a one-time increase to that move, but that's already more significant than we want it to be. And once we did that one-time move, the amount of movement annually would drop significantly because we will have stabilized the school grade configurations. We will have returned students to their community schools to a much more significant effect. And we will, at that point in time, be able to speak to you as staff with greater efficiency and effectiveness around the resources we have. This plan right here doesn't save us any money. It allows us to redistribute the money we're given almost entirely formula driven in a more effective and efficient way. So that the impetus of this isn't a budgetary savings. It's to allow us to use our dollars more wisely. So the point around the movement is that we're moving those students every single year. And I can't tell you how much on a day-to-day basis we're looking at inefficiency and ineffectiveness when we have almost the entirety of school community going around the school that's in that community. Upwards of 80, 85%, 90% of students not going to the school they can see, going somewhere else. Playing that out on almost every resource level you can think of, not to mention transportation, is hurting our ability to serve our students. And that's the spirit of why we're bringing this forward. So I wanted to make that clarification. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Stout around the timelines for when the phasing out would take place for those carefully thought through specialized program classes.
Thanks very much. So good question around clarity. So the phasing out of those programs is based on the number of years the students can be in it. So the plan would be that we would not start phasing students out until I guess it would be June of 2027. So the class that started in June of September 2026 they would be started to phase out. Does that make sense? So if you're intended to be in a program for 2 years, or the program length would be 2 years, that's why the phasing is 2 years.
So just to comment on, thank you for that explanation, because it certainly, there's, a lot of concern with parents right now with their, their children in these programs. So it would give them time to, make alternative, arrangements. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Jenkins. Zone 8, Trustee Dixon.
Through you, Chair. I guess my one question, what are the goals for the Indigenous education in the opinion of the director and staff? And how do they to provide direction to be able to fulfill it within this program?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, a couple of points. One, the work we're doing both in the Indigenous team and really with our Indigenous community is an underpinning of all the work we do, regardless of whether you're an enhanced English program, French immersion program, kindergarten, or other. What we're looking to do is to add an external researcher that the Indigenous team is helping us select to help look at effective practices for Indigenous learners, but also for non-Indigenous students who are learning about Indigenous ways of knowing and living. And we're really excited about that third external researcher to join Dr. Stephanie Arnott and Dr. Gillian Perrick, who did some analyses for us on dynamic bilingualism and inclusive education, so that we can find out what strategies we can integrate throughout our classrooms. And that's start to success. That's not only elementary, because we know we've got work to do with our Indigenous learners and the stagnation in their progress academically, and I think on a wellness front too. So that external research over the winter and spring will be integrated into upcoming reports for the Board of Trustees based on what we learned from those experts in the field that we're looking for guidance for.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just to echo what my other colleagues have talked about with the detailed risk assessment, I think it's going to be very important for us to really get a better understanding of where we're going to be with that. And then, of course, last question, when it comes to the PSN and the GLP students, I think we need a little bit more clarity, because they're also going to be phased out. And there's some kids that with their psychological need, even though they do phase out in 2 years, they're still going to be able to need that. So I think I'd like to see how that falls into the risk assessment.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Stout just to comment on the March report. Trustee Dixon will have a bit more of the detail on the risk analysis, on the transitioning and the school boundaries piece, and the detail sort of zone to zone to zone, which is complex for us as an organization. It's not cookie cutter for us. So we will provide some of that in the March report, and then additional transition planning that Trustee Forty was talking about were the proposal to be approved around how we plan for the fall of 2026. Those are two different transition pieces. We've got both in check for you, but one's coming up in the next report. And over to the Superintendent. To clarify, I think a point from the last commentary and then this one.
So again, I think the phasing out is an important piece, so that families understand that if their child is currently in a specialized program class that is proposed to be phased out, that they would be able to see their time through that. And we would be certainly looking to have open and transparent dialogue about what those transition plans after the 3 years, when they finish in the program, what that would look like in terms of support across the system and the classes that they would then be accessing at that point in their educational journey. To just touch briefly on kind of the PSN and GLP classes, I think that something to note is that we will maintain a general learning program for our intermediate age students. And I think that one of the internal pieces of information that we've received, but is also supported in the external research, is that we do, what we find is that when students enter the specialized program class, primary special needs class, they stay in that pathway, carry on to general learning program, and then stay in the general learning program. Most students who enter that pathway in grade 1 stay in that pathway. We haven't been looking at students coming out of that pathway. And so part of the problem with that, of course, is that we're streaming students at a very early age. And when we're looking at developing learning profiles and understanding, absolutely, there are important pieces that we learn through a psychological assessment or various other assessments that we might use to help inform us about a student's learning profile. There are a lot of other pieces of information that we need to gather. And in those really early years, it's important that we're gathering all of that information before we're making significant decisions about the pathways that students will, at this point anyways, the research we have shows stay in that pathway. So I hope that by delaying that streaming, what we will see is that we have a better understanding of those student profiles. And then we will be better able to say, we are confident that now entering this streaming pathway in a transparent conversation with families, which I think is another really critical point, is that we have made a more informed and with a little bit more time. And that's why we'd like to see those resources reinvested in the general classroom so that we're supporting students there alongside their peers, and then really understanding that learning process.
All right, thank you, Trustee Dixon. Zone 9, Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I just want to step back for a moment if I can. What we're being asked tonight is to approve the consultation plan. And what we know and what we've talked about again and again is that students in our district experience disparities in access to programs. Students in our district have disparities in outcomes within our programs, specifically racialized students, students of lower socioeconomic class, 2S LGBTQ students, students with disabilities. The outcomes are not equitable. We stream students, the pathways that Superintendent Stout is referring to, inequitably. We do that based on psych ed assessments and assessments early on, and then those students are locked into those pathways. We know that specialized classes aren't accessible for many of our students right now. We know that the distribution of resources from one school to the next is not equitable. What we're talking about here is creating an inclusive model. What we're talking about is creating a program that doesn't withdraw supports, but it reintegrates supports and makes those supports available and makes the programs available to all students. I had a conversation with a parent recently who said to me, why would I send my child to school A, which gets a rating on whatever, I don't know, rating score she was using, of like a 2.5, when currently my child goes to a school that's rated a 7. And my response was, well, every school should be a 7. We shouldn't have some schools that are 2.5s and some that are 7s. And so I guess my question, really, going back to what we're being asked to do, we're being asked to approve this consultation plan. I would absolutely endorse approving this consultation plan. My question is, what metrics will be used to evaluate the outcomes? And so I would like to see built into a consultation plan that includes the first few years within a new model. Because I think we are very clear in terms of all of our data that we need to make a change. And really the question that we need to be asking is, how are we going to be able to demonstrate that we are addressing these disparities? How are we going to be able to demonstrate? And none of us has a crystal ball. We can't guarantee that there's going to be equity from one school to the next, but we have done the research. We're doing the consultations with the community. And the next part of it that I would ask is, how are we going to then consult with the community actively once a program, a new program is in place? How are we going to continue to consult, to touch base with those students with disabilities, to touch base with the racialized students, to touch base with the students who have previously been streamed in one way and we're trying to bring them back in to the fold? How are we going to continue that consultation? So that's my question, and it's one I think that helps in supporting this first stage, is to say that there, what is going to happen in as we go along, to demonstrate to the public that we're doing this because we want to address these disparities.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Trustee Kaplan-Murth hits on critical elements here, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Laverne for some of the measures we're going to be looking at. And I just want to speak to a couple of things to get this part of the conversation started. First of all, we believe in community schools. We believe every single one of our schools should be a great place and space for learning, and we have that at the core of our decision-making processes. We also think that by bringing students closer to their community schools, when only 8 to 10 to 12% of the students in that community are going to that school now and then return to the school to play on the structure at the end of the day. They've done something else somewhere else during their educational experience and then come back to their community school because it's where they live. We believe that by bringing students back to their community schools, we bring them closer to the services that can help them, be it on a learning front or a wellness front. We have in place a number of measures because it is true what Trustee Kaplan-Murphy is saying. We don't have a crystal ball, and this isn't a magic manifesto. This is an infrastructural plan that isn't the work. The work is what happens after this to get to all of our students and serve their needs. We have a series of trackers for early literacy and early numeracy that Superintendent Laverne and his team are working on. I'm going to ask him to comment on that with some frameworks for learning. And we're looking to put in, not only for our enhanced English program, those trackers from kindergarten to grade 2, but a version of the DELF, the Diplôme d'études en langue française, at the elementary level. It's called the DELF Prime, to help us gauge. This isn't an exclusionary entry or exit from immersion. It's to help the system gauge how the progress in French language acquisition is going. We need to do exactly what Trustee Kaplan-Murphy is talking about over the first 3 to 5 years of this transition as students settle back into community schools. What that also does for us is allow us to remobilize the resources more effectively and efficiently to support where there are needs. This plan won't get rid of our equity issues, but it'll reduce the equity slope significantly because right now our community schools are being exacerbated on the equity discussion because of the way we are streaming them from one program to another. The notion of a dual track program offering predominantly across the vast majority of our schools. There's a handful of French immersion centers and a handful of English sites that may remain intact. And again, that'll be the March report for the Board of Trustees, but it is to get to the points that Trustee Kaplan-Murphy is speaking to. And I'm going to turn over to Superintendent Laverne, whose leadership and his team are working on our behalf.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. A brilliant question. And a year ago, when I was here for the first time speaking on a learning report, I stated at the time that I am extremely lucky to have walked into this work at this time, and that statement stands true today. We have and are building far better tools that we can use on a regular basis to progress monitor student learning and monitor their achievement as it's improving. And these are tools that we did not have to the same degree 5, 10, 15 years ago, certainly not when I was in school. So we have greater access to tools that give us more in-time information on how students are doing, where their strengths are, and where they need some support. And that's allowing us to target specific interventions and supports onto their direct learning needs to a far greater degree than we ever have before. And that has actually moved a lot of our work and our professional learning is very much focused on progress monitoring right now and how that is being used to inform the actions. And then the question that is becoming just part of our narrative is, how do we know? How do we know that that has made a difference for the students? We're certainly on a journey with this right now and tightening up our practices in that area. But as we look to the work of the EPR, we are looking at the early reading screener data that we're using this year. And we were a board that started with early reading screeners before it was mandated. We had an in-house developed math assessment tool that the math team this year has worked to strengthen to a greater degree. We engaged with STEP assessments for ESL and ELD learners a number of years ago. And we are strengthening our ability to use those on a more frequent basis so that we're also moving from capturing data as a once-a-year snapshot to see where things are to an ongoing tool that tells us that, yes, things are moving in a good direction, or wait a second, we have something that we need to focus on here, we can apply the correct intervention to it. So that idea of progress monitoring is probably the most important piece that we're working on in our learning programming right now.
All right, thank you, Trustee Kaplan-Meier. Moving on to Zone 10, Trustee Bell.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I want to start off by thanking everyone for all of their work and for the thoughtful recommendations and questions that have come forth tonight. I want to say as well to the director for responding to my questions behind the scene as well. I very much appreciate that. The consultation component of this, I want to say to my community that I'm looking forward to hosting a consultation with them, because I believe that it is absolutely important that I bring back to the table here the feedback that they have. And speaking of that feedback, and also the feedback of our advisory committees, one of the things that I've heard that will make this model a success is if people can see their feedback incorporated into the model. And one of the things that we've heard time and time again is the importance of equity. And so my recommendation as it stands right now is if we could get someone to do a review of the model with an equity lens, because I think it's very important for us to articulate what are our commitments for Indigenous students, for what will this model really look like for special education students. Will it be what we expect? And I think a good step towards that is an analysis through an equity lens. So I'll leave that there. I will also say, I think when it comes to ensuring that this is the best model for all of our communities, an important, really important piece that I've been hearing about are the boundaries. And I know that that work is still underway, but I'm not quite clear. So my first question is, I'm not quite clear on when and how trustees will be able to provide feedback into the boundaries. Those boundaries will in fact create or break up communities. And I think when we're talking about the impact on the socioeconomic reality of a community, those boundaries will be absolutely important and could make or break how a school is perceived. And so with that, my first question is how will we be able to provide, when and how will we be able to provide feedback on the boundaries that are set?
Through you, Madam Chair, really appreciate, Trustee Bell, your comments. To begin, I have to share that most schools currently have anywhere between 1 and 7 boundaries. And what we're looking to do as staff is to provide greater equity of access and program stability so that we keep more communities whole, because right now, if you think of 7 boundaries for one given school, you're already dividing up that community in a different lens. And I understand that there's multiple interpretations of what community means, but on balance, the intent here is to have students attend the school that's really closest to where they live for all the reasons that we spoke about. So I would say yes to all of what you said. That's the intent. With respect to what's coming forward to the Board of Trustees, Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, March 4th, will be a report that speaks in greater detail to the boundary reconfigurations, keeping into context, of course, the pupil accommodation review guidelines that we as a district look to adhere to, and any other considerations with respect to the nature of our current boundaries and any changes to them. That will be brought forward, much like some of the preliminary context for this report. We'll set up some time with members of the Board of Trustees to take them through that with our planning department under Associate Director Giroir's leadership, so that the Board of Trustees are able to get a sense of what's coming in a report, and then of course a fulsome report that'll be submitted the Friday before in our package. But all to say that that is the second part of this. Comprehensive report will be that one coming in March, and some time before that for the Board of Trustees to digest the information.
Okay, just a clarification. Will we in fact be able to give feedback and have that feedback incorporated? It was the question.
So I think much like the fact that over the course of the winter season, we're getting feedback on not only this report, but of course the boundaries piece, there'll be an opportunity for members of the communities and Board of Trustees to provide input as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. My second question through you, Chair, is with regard to what we've already heard tonight. So maybe it's a recommendation. Is we've heard how incredible the alternative tenants are. We've also heard from the Indigenous Education Council the importance of the Algonquin protocols, and I am so grateful that we have included them in the review part of this process. But I would like to see a reflection of those within the model itself. And so I'm hopeful that we will in fact see that piece of feedback that we have received and heard from around this table and from people in our community in the next iteration of the model. No need to respond. That's a recommendation. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Trustee Bell. The next zone is my zone, so I am going to ask Trustee Lyra to take the chair.
Trustee Milburn?
All right, so tonight, I have many questions about the program review, but tonight we are voting specifically on the community consultation plan. So we are about to talk about my favorite topic, which is public engagement. So my first question is, in the community consultation sessions, it's inevitable that there are going to be underrepresented groups. I would like to hear from first the director and then any staff that would like to add, what groups do you predict will be underrepresented in this consultation?
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'll turn to staff for additional perspective. I know Kennan's done a lot of work in the analysis of some of the feedback we've gathered to date. A couple of pieces. One, towards the end of the report, pages 18 and 17 and 18, we do speak to the importance of having not only broad community consultation by geographic area, 3 of those across the city, and a virtual session, of course, not only for members of the community, but staff, as well as input from students, but also specific community consultations with our Indigenous community. Our Indigenous team is looking to set those up. In addition to some of our, what would be our higher raised school sites, the FACE and SATE sites that we have in place, so that we are broadening our consultation as much as possible to gather as diverse a perspective as we can. So those are a couple of examples of some of the differentiated sessions we're looking to put in place. Apologize for staff if there's any additional comment. I'm not sure if dates have been established. Kenan, can you speak to that, or is that in progress?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Trustee Milburn. We are currently ironing out some of the last final dates that we need to set up. With respect to your question, I've been working closely with Chantel Smith, who represents SATE, and Sama Solomon, who represents FACE. And we are actively looking at how we can address some of those gaps that we are very likely going to see in the community zone meeting sessions. One of the suggestions and one of the things that we are following through is actually having some of these sessions within the community buildings of these families, so that all they have to do is come down to the lobby and share their thoughts that way. So instead of them coming to us, we're going to them and gathering feedback in that way. So that's one of the ways that we're looking to expand this consultation beyond just specific school sites, but going into the communities and gathering feedback that way.
Trustee Milburn?
All right, so I'm going to build on that question, and I can appreciate that we are looking at different ways to engage and going directly into these community buildings, I will call it, or looking at ways that we can directly go into these communities. But what is the plan if we do not see a representation from these underrepresented groups? And when I'm referring to the underrepresented groups, I'm talking about the groups that are we are constantly seeing coming back up that are underperforming in our grades, or the ones that we don't hear from. I am actively worried that we are only going to hear from the loudest voices in the room and not the ones that don't necessarily have the time to come and publicly engage. And I'm worried that if that happens, we're going to get we're going to leave these students behind in this program review.
Couple of points there, and Kenan, I know you won't say this, so I'm going to say it on your behalf. I think Kenan and the team in Reed and through our strategic analysis really strives to make sure we're not hearing solely from the loudest, or we're not doing a tally count of how many voices we've heard. That's really important for this district because we have been in situations in the past where the same voices have been the same ones at all of the consultation sessions. We've purposely got some going on simultaneously to try and allow for a greater diversity of representation to speak on behalf of themselves and on behalf of the communities they serve. So I think Kenan has done a really good job in the analysis of the reports to capture a bit of the spirit of what I think Vice Chair Milburn is speaking to. And then it's our proactive attempt, and I don't only mean staff, I mean all of us, the Board of Trustees, reaching out to their communities and constituents, staff and our school communities. We've got great support from our principal, vice principal leadership on engaging their communities. It's a large, complex change management process, and we all have to reach out through our networks to get as wide a representation as Trustee Milburn's talking about.
Okay. Trustee Milburn, I'm going to hand the chair back to you, but it is 9 o'clock. Can we take our break?
Yes, don't worry. I'm going to first go to the student trustees and then see if they would like to ask any questions, and then we can take a 5-minute break. And then immediately following the break, we're going to go to first-time speakers from our community partners. Student trustees, I will let you raise your hand if you have questions. Student trustees Zhang. I believe we have 2 student trustees online as well, but student trustee Zhang, please go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I just wanted to ask a general question. As you guys move towards consultations for this plan, do you have any plans to go directly to students and to understand their experiences and stories when it comes to putting together the report for March?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's an excellent question from the student trustee. Two comments there. One, I wish we had have taped the student Senate session last spring on this very item, as students spoke to the fact that they live next door to another student and yet didn't share a single class with them until D-streamed grade 9. Next door neighbor never had the same class until they got to high school. And now with our current structure, give this some thought that those 2 students, whoever they might be, would be together in kindergarten, potentially never together again till grade 9, and then together again in grade 9 and 10. That's the kind of separation we've got going on right now. So from a student senate point of view, I can't remember the date, but that's one of the dates we have in place. It's awkward for staff because we don't have an approved consultation plan, but we have a date behind the scenes to meet with student senate. We're also looking at ways, and I'll turn it over to staff for some additional detail, to not, in the least inhibitive way possible. We know how busy secondary sites are, and we're aiming at higher elementary and secondary. It's very hard to ask a student in grade 1, what their elementary experience was like on balance, but we are looking at the upper elementary and early secondary from additional feedback, looking back at their elementary experience to gather that from our intermediate and secondary sites. So very much in the works.
If that is everything, student trustee Zhang, and I'm seeing no other hands, we are going to take a break. I am asking everyone to be back here promptly by 9:10, and then we will start with our community partner questions for first-time speakers. See everyone promptly back at 9:10. I'm giving everyone a 2-minute warning. All right, I'm going to be calling everyone, I'm going to be calling the meeting back to order. If everyone can please return to their seats. Okay. All right, I believe, apologies everyone, I'm just doing the math. I believe that is quorum. So we can get started. So we're now going to look to our community partners. If you could please raise your hand. We're going to enter back into regular committee of the whole rules. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. So Lily Miller, if there's anyone else, please raise your hand. But Lily Miller, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that. I want to acknowledge the 114 unmarked burial sites, first of all, because I think it's important to underpin what I'm talking about with the loss that the Indigenous peoples have experienced due to colonization. And part of what I'm going to ask about is about decolonizing. When the Indigenous Education Council was consulted, we emphasized that it's important that Indigenous content, indigeneity be within the framework of this proposal, of this plan. And when we were approached, we were told that anything's possible. And so when we read this proposal last week, we were all very, very disappointed, very upset that there's not one word in it about Indigenous peoples, let alone the framework, including anything about Indigenous peoples. We noticed though that the English were consulted and the French were consulted, and it's very clear. Their voices are very clear there. And perhaps some people don't understand why the board should include indigeneity in the framework. And you know, some of the members spoke about the TRC calls to action, or even UNDRIP, you know, articles, I think it's 15 and 16. You know, there is an ethical responsibility and there's a moral responsibility to make changes in the framework, not in the aftermath. Right here, what you're talking about is the framework. And we were very disappointed that wasn't there. And Lynn, when you spoke about the trustee at the beginning who pioneered and probably it was quite difficult to get French immersion within the school board and probably had a lot of naysayers. And that gave me hope that it is possible to embed indigeneity within the foundational framework of this, not as an app, not we'll add it after. So I guess my question is, you know, we spoke about it at great length at the Indigenous Education Council, and we found out that the Indigenous education team was not consulted on how to incorporate indigeneity into the framework. And I heard you say that you're going to consult them after, but it has to be, well, I mean, it seems like this is a done deal now, but just disappointed because this was a really great opportunity for some transformational change and to really decolonize. Other boards have been doing this, and we really felt that this was a great opportunity. So just wondering where that went, because I know it was really emphasized when you were there that we wanted Indigenous pedagogy, Indigenous content within the framework. And I know, you said you can't, you're not listening to like the loudest voices, but when we read that, this tells us otherwise. Thank you.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to turn over to Kenan here to speak, because we did provide some additional time in the fall season to go back to our advisory bodies, and I know that our Indigenous team and the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee did have an opportunity. That's part of where we spoke about a third-party external researcher who's from an Indigenous background. Kenan, can you give a bit of feedback? And I know a memo went out to the Board of Trustees that had some information from those consultations, just to give a sense of some of the feedback we got during the fall season.
Sure, I'll touch on it briefly, and then maybe I'll also pass it over to General Counsel Mark, because he was actually the one who led the IAC session. I wasn't there for that one. However, my understanding of that session was that it was where we heard from IAC to engage an Indigenous researcher to give us feedback on our current program offerings, on our approach to make things more equitable moving forward. Understandably, that takes a great deal of time for any scholar to engage in. So I don't know when that information is coming forward from the Indigenous scholar, but no, I know that it's happening. Beyond that, we didn't feel like we could do a consultation on our programming without more kind of Indigenous feedback, and that's where we engaged our Indigenous team. They kind of sat and shared what they felt they needed changed, and that's what's brought forth in the advisory committee consultation report that you can find on the Engage website. And so that's what I've gathered. General Counsel Mark, if you have any other further comments, please feel free.
Through you, Chair, if it's okay to continue comment there. So just by way of context, when the fall consultation was happening, this was a consultation with each of the advisory committees to the board, IAC being one of those advisory committees. The staff recognized that IAC being an Indigenous council may have wanted to take a bit of a different approach to its consultation. And so in order to provide IAC that opportunity to explain to us what it might want to do and how we might be able to modify the consultation to best suit the kind of Indigenous practices that they would like to see, I went to an IAC committee or an IAC council meeting, and I asked, how can we modify this consultation approach to best accommodate the kind of perspectives and approaches that you would want to see. And I got 3 answers at that meeting, and I reviewed these answers in detail with the council before I left. The first answer was IAC did not believe that it was the right body to provide that feedback. The second answer was that in the spring consultation, which is coming up now in 2025, that they would like to see a substantial consultation with the Indigenous population, which I believe is now part of that consultation plan. And the third piece was to engage this Indigenous academic. And so we have essentially fulfilled all 3 of those. On the first piece, we quite frankly were a little surprised that IAC didn't want to provide consultation at that stage. And so in order to make sure that we did have an Indigenous perspective, we then did the next best thing that we could think of, which was to go to our Indigenous team internally at the district and consult with them. And we did engage in a consultation with the Indigenous team, and that formed part of our fall consultation. So I think we did as best as we could within the restraints that existed to get that Indigenous perspective before the board and as part of this consultation plan. And as I said as well, it is definitely integrated into the plans for the spring consultation.
That's fine, thanks.
All right, thank you. And then I had 3 hands go up all at once, so I am just going to be picking in order. So we have Anthony, and then we have Chris, and then we have Stephen. So Anthony, please go ahead. Mr. Wong, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm trying to start the video. Through you, the chair. All right. First of all, kudos for this ambitious project for the inclusion, bringing in so quickly. I wasn't even expecting it. Last week, just a couple weeks ago, there was the presentation from the SAYAC about the pilot project for inclusive learning, and which leads into this, and which is very early stages, and this fast forwards everything. And me, myself, I had presented to my school council at Colonel By about how potentially one could even bring it forth towards the regular school programs in general, what lessons learned could be from this. But overall, I've got 6 major points that I would like to bring forward. One, starting off with from the pilot project for inclusive learning, the key performance indicators that was brought up about collaboration and cooperation that leads into this is that the teachers need to have among them, they need to have organically possibilities to collaborate. And it makes really a big difference to succeed for this type of activity, and have collaborate during prep time with the principal to sort out issues with challenges with the students, and for training during staff meetings. So and that means, in particular, if that's the case, bringing up to the second point there, is that having a discussion at the last OCASC meeting with fellow parents, and including parents that are teachers, experienced teachers themselves, and with HR related experience, is that this requires releasing critical time for teachers, be it legislated or bargained, and this is experienced even from parents from perspectives of across Canada. So it really there needs to be time put aside for the teachers if this is to be successful, I believe. And bus schedules need to be that are in conflict need to be rescheduled in some way. So for those of you that better understand that, that's fairly new to me, but my understanding, that's a very serious conflict. more EAs to support this. So this would require more funding somehow from the province. And then again, more organic time. So for preparation, so that means more funding. And then, so as mentioned by one of the reps,
Mr. Wong, you are over time. I'm happy to add you back to the second time speakers list. I can see lots of nodding heads around the room as you're making the points, and I know you can't see us directly. I'm going to let staff respond, but we're happy to add you back to the second time speaker.
Okay.
Just a couple of key points, then I'll turn it over to staff around specific special education queries. 2 points I wanted to make quickly. One, absolutely a professional development plan and a learning resource strategy for any changes to programming. And no question, and you'll find both in the report and resource implications, the point on capacity building and the point in additional operational considerations, transportation. No question, Anthony, that those are factors we're going to need to take a look at over the course of a transition on any approval of a proposed model. And over to Superintendent Stout.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Nice to see you. I think I would just say that I appreciate the feedback, and certainly part of the work that we've engaged in over the last few years around inclusion in our schools has taught us a lot, and it is those pieces that is helping to inform some of the really key pieces of work that we need to engage in. And so certainly appreciate you highlighting that critical need for educators to be collaborating and cooperating, and how we can support that is absolutely part of our thinking at this time and wanting to move the plan forward.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to continue down our speakers list. So I have Chris and then I have Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I appreciate the opportunity to bring forward some concerns from the members that I represent, which are the educational assistants and the registered early childhood educators across our district. And one of the big things that is coming back in sort of feedback consultations we've been having already is that educational assistants and registered early childhood educators are already facing major workload pressures as it stands now. There's a strong feeling that redeployment of educational assistants will not fix the staffing allocation issues for our schools. And my question through you, Chair, is how does the board expect to support SSP members when their workload increases again to support students who have otherwise been considered for these higher ratio classes?
Through you, Madam Chair, really appreciate, Chris, the questions this evening and our conversation earlier on the program review at the elementary level. I think the points you're raising on behalf of our employees and your members are valid. The complexities of the classroom are continue to grow and continue to provide both challenges and opportunities for us. From a management perspective, I know the Board of Trustees has this in their sights in terms of how we support our students. The point of the work here, it's not a magic fix to the work we need to do in our classrooms. It is a look at trying to simplify our infrastructure, simplifying our boundaries, our grade configurations, keeping cohorts of students together to try to remobilize our supports as effectively and efficiently as we can to get to some of the issues you're mentioning because of the increased complexities in our classrooms, no question. So it's a work in progress. It's definitely not a magic fix. But it's something, that will, we think, in a simplified and streamlined infrastructure, allow us to redeploy resources over time more and more optimally for the system. So valid points and points that we'll undoubtedly be working on over the course of any transition to a new structure at the elementary level.
Chris, I can hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick follow-up and perhaps another perspective to share. So a lot of much of the feedback that I have gotten from our members has been a lot of worry as well for the students that they serve daily. You know, so these obviously, the members that I represent are student-facing members. They're the first point of contact. And, you know, they're very acutely aware of their needs and whatnot. And in a lot of cases, I guess the question, and I think the question would come from parents as well too, who have seen their students go from their community-based schools and in situations where they haven't been successful in their community-based schools and have been placed into a specialized program class and have ultimately flourished in these spaces. And you know, so the worry is that you know, as they kind of move back to these their community-based schools, you know, a lot of my members are worried for these students as well too, and as I'm sure, obviously their parents and whatnot would be. So, you know, I guess what do we say to our parents of those students who are, you know, you know, I think rightfully fearful for their child kind of regressing in this situation. Thank you.
Please.
Thanks so much, Chris, and appreciate you bringing that perspective forward. And certainly, I think it's not lost on us how complex these situations are, and they are all individualized. And I mentioned that before, and I think it's really important that we are really thoughtful about the individual plan for each individual student. I think what I would want people to, again, remember is that how we are supporting a student within that learning environment is always a shifting landscape, and that we want to provide the most intensive and support we want to provide the support in the right way at the right time. And so understanding what those concerns are and then putting forth a plan to be monitoring it to see if it's working, and if it's not working, what we can do differently. I think we thought a lot about the classrooms that we would put forward in a proposal here. And so we were very mindful of the level of need of the student who would be potentially returning. Let me rephrase that, because I think that's adding to some of the confusion. We wanted to be mindful of the learning profiles of the students who we were considering when we were talking about support in the regular classroom. And so when we think about some of our most complex learning profiles, students with the most complex learning profiles, they will still have access to specialized program classes. When we're looking, and it's not to take away from the learning profiles of the class, the students in the classes who we have proposed that we would be phasing out those classes, because they're all complex and they're all little individual humans that we want to make sure we're coming up with a good plan for. But I think it's also something that we have to be really mindful of also the other impacts of having students in a specialized program class. And then we have to, as I started by saying, really think concretely about what that particular student needs in that particular moment, and how we can take them to that next step. They all have skills at a certain level that we can build upon, and certainly a lot of the professional development we're doing talks about what that kind of asset-based lens is, and how we are understanding students where they are currently at and helping them to take that very next step. And I think that by continuing to focus on those individual needs, that's where we'll really see what each of those individual plans needs to be.
Chris, would you like to add anything with your 23 seconds left?
I think I do, but I've got a couple more questions. I think I'll wait, and I'll look to be added to the second time speakers list. So through you, Chair, I thank you for the time.
All right, thank you very much. Continuing down my first time speakers list, I have Stephen, and then I have Jameson. Stephen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. I just want to start by thanking this body for including unions and teachers' perspectives. So important. That's very inclusive of you, and it's rare in this province. And I think we can all agree that unions should be part of this body. So thanks again. So moving to an inclusion model, I think we can all agree that inclusion is great, but it requires significant supports, as we've seen in boards across the province, and I think we could say in general in public education, in the institution of public education. So we're distributing 42 teachers and 13 EAs isn't going to cut it. When you're distributing some of our neediest students into regular classrooms. This is a huge concern for our members, and they're trying to just put that out of their heads and trying to find their way forward each and every day. The cuts are adding up to $1,600 per student coming from the province, which means in a school like Broadview, it's $1.3 million in cuts. That's what exists now. And I'm not pointing my finger at anybody around this table, but that's the reality that we're facing. So we're going to an inclusion model. It's going to take a lot more than simply distributing a few teachers and EAs. We all know that, I think. So I'm just going to throw that out there. What are those supports that we're going to invest and reinvest to support this inclusion model?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Stephen's putting on the table as the reality of our day-to-day work is true. I think it's truth in many respects. I think beyond the reallocation of any number of staff, I think what we are looking to do, if the proposal is approved, to really refresh our approach to teaching and learning. It's going to take all of us to support students in the classroom. I visit a school a week and I see firsthand how hard our educators are working. Part of what this opportunity of a program review as a large, complex change management process gives us is a chance to really regroup, reframe our teaching and learning, focusing in on principles that I know our educators know of well, but that need to continue to get our support from. Universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy as foundations to our approach, and really try to simplify as much as we possibly can from a management side what we're asking our educators to do. I do sincerely feel we're over-engineered in a number of things, and we need to try and simplify. This plan looks to simplify the infrastructure, but I think what Stephen's sharing is a greater simplification in the day-to-day teaching and learning environments to the greatest extent that we can, because the challenges and the complexities of our students are real and they're in front of us every day. I don't dispute what Stephen shared with us. It's a work in progress for all of us, and there's no magic fix. It's all of us working together, advocating for areas where we don't have funding. I think Stephen raised a few good points, but also trying to mobilize within ourselves and what we have in our control to optimize our resources for the best teaching and learning environments we can have in front of our students.
Thank you. And I think it's contingent to all of us, but there are some people around this table that can have an impact on helping us stop the cuts to public education, because really it's coming down to that when we look at that number, $1,600 per student per year. I just wanted to move on to the name Enhanced English, and I was wondering exactly what those enhancements are. Are teachers going to see enhanced learning supports for the neediest students in their care, enhanced security and safety, ensuring fewer violent incidents? And I think we can all agree that more supports in the classroom would help that happen. And enhanced learning assessments that ensure all students get the programming they deserve, and not just the ones that can afford to get their kids private testing. So I just throw those, I think there's 3 or 4 things there that I like clarity on. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Associate Director Reynolds to comment a bit on some of the safety elements and some of the concerns on that front. The one thing I will bring back to the attention, because I think Stephen raises a good point, in terms of enhanced English, what we're looking to do is really clarify for the public and a broader sort of a marketing perspective that the vast majority of the time, 84% of our students' time in that program, grades 1 to 8, would be having subject areas or disciplines in the English language, beyond just English, language arts, and mathematics, a number of other subject areas with, of course, some time in core French. And that part of what we see as an enhanced English program is the tracking and monitoring of progress in early literacy and early numeracy that Superintendent Laverne spoke to earlier, a mechanism to be able to track that annually for students in kindergarten through to grade 2, not only for their English language acquisition, but for the decision-making parents might make in remaining in an enhanced English program or towards a French immersion program. So that's one of the key aspects of the enhanced English program from our perspective, that ongoing monitoring that's so important. I will turn it over to our Associate Director for any comments around student safety, those elements from our district's perspective.
Sure. Thank you. And through you, Chair. There's a lot to comment in terms of the work that's been done over the last several years and continues to happen in terms of promoting safe classrooms and safe schools. And feel free to jump in. But the investment alone in BMS training, behavior management systems training, that's occurring virtually every EA. I think almost every administrator, dozens of classroom teachers are receiving this training, which helps manage the unfortunate situations where students are having difficulty regulating. The work with PPE that's done, the investment in EAs, even if we're not seeing the number of EAs increase significantly. Most recently, we brought on a program manager for educational assistance to signify the importance of the role in our schools and to try to help the senior team deliberately create professional learning opportunities for EAs who are often playing a key role in supporting that safety. We hear often from our principals and other staff members about the types of needs and evolving needs in our schools. And we're looking at ways to continue to meet those needs. Recently, we've been having conversations around enhanced in-school communication, using portable radios and things of that nature. So it's multifaceted, from infrastructure through to staff, through to development. The investment over the last several years in social emotional learning teachers, again, a position that was brand new to us, and we may have had one a few years ago, and now we have many. 6.5, which we could use more for sure. But again, these are the types of things that we're doing to try to make our classrooms and schools as safe as possible. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add. That's just a sampling.
All right. With that said, there's nothing else from staff? Correct. Okay. Sorry. Stephen, you have 28 seconds left on the clock.
Thank you. I will use them. So I think we can all agree that, upfront investments in the system will always save us money down the road. And governments are notoriously bad at looking at extended timelines. And in the end, that's what's going to really turn things around. But in the short term, we're looking at right now, we're seeing huge gaps. Teachers are hitting the wall, and they need time off for their physical and mental health. And this is huge. It's having a huge impact on the system. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen. Jamison, and then we're going to go to Trustee Lyra, and then we'll be entering second-time speakers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm usually in 2 dimensions on the screen, so it's nice to see everybody in 3D. Just some comments, I suppose, on the rollout of the Active Community Engagement Campaign. Perhaps just a nod, Superintendent Laverne, OCV is just going to have the 2 program pathways. That's the only changes there.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I would suggest during the rollout, just for clarification for public and all the questions you've seen today, the SPC class size being phased out, that may diminish already small classrooms to 2 or 3 students in the final year. Clarify for parents, are they going to be bused and transferred to amalgamate, or are you going to have classrooms of 1, 2, 3 possible students? And whether the movement back into an SPC will be an option for parents after the integration, supported integration, emphasis on supported, whether or not that's going to be an option going on further, because fear of the unknown is greater than the fear of the firm. Those who have sat on Joint Health and Safety Committee with me, or in HR or Employee Services meetings with me, know I love data. I'm conscientious about it. So Trustee Kaplan-Murr's question about having measurables and metrics. Again, all this achievement and the progress, we need numbers now and currently, and to compare apples to apples, fairly in a couple of years. So taking metrics now and taking the time to have the data now so that we can see if there's market change, I think is integral to the scientific process. And I would also steer for my occasional teacher members who are I don't want to say not affected by this, but we're used to changing positions year after year, sometimes during the year, daily occasionals, DOTs and LTOs. So I would suggest, previously we had a thought exchange for staff comment. And I think that would be an excellent option instead of our 3 staff town halls, which require either attendance or locked in time. That was positive thought exchange, and that people could create comments, and then we had a star process afterwards, I recall, and staff really seemed to be able to glom on. Again, not the loudest, not the the most votes, but at least we get a breadth there, and it gives staff members opportunities on their own time or when they have a moment to emphasize what's important to them. So I thought that would be an effective way, perhaps also for my members and perhaps students, as we heard for the student voice. I'm going to stereotype a bit, but students love technology, particularly in the high school level. And so maybe a thought exchange at that level would also be an effective way to allow access and voices. Thanks.
Absolutely. Very, very quickly through you, Madam Chair, I'll ask General Manager Pernari to speak to it. I think, Jameson, some of what you're speaking to is in our proposal moving forward.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we do have an online survey that's going to be launched on Engage following the board meeting next week, and it will include a component for staff to submit their particular comments. We can have a discussion about whether or not another thought exchange in particular, as opposed to this type of survey would be needed. And we'll have that discussion with the project team, but that'll be available from January 29th until March 7th, and will be open to staff, parents, community members, and students as well.
All right, and thank you for using all the way up to the last second. So we're now going to be entering the second time speakers list, and I apologize, I had misspoken before. So currently on my list, I have Trustee Lyra, then Trustee Nash, then Trustee Kaplan-Murth, then Anthony Wong, and then Chris Walsh. Trustee Lyra.
Thanks. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about where we are now and why we're doing this review. We, the district, have looked for a number of years at the struggling English program, amongst other things. By any metric that we measure, the current English program struggles. It doesn't get the same EQO results. It doesn't get the same well-being scores. It doesn't get the same enrollment. We get double and triple split grade classes. It's a program that struggles for a number of reasons, and rebranding it didn't help. So my questions are about how this new program seeks to address that inequity. I heard a great deal, and I'm going to build on what Trustee Scott has said about equity of access, about how putting the French immersion program in every school is going to guarantee that every child has access to the French immersion program. But I want to talk about equity of outcome. I want to talk about the students who choose to go into the English program and how we are ensuring that the English program is not fundamentally flawed. So I guess that is my first question. How are we going to ensure that our English program does not continue to be streaming for special education students?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the fall of 2015, a member of the Board of Trustees asked staff to look at some of the issues that Trustee Lyra is mentioning around English programming. And what came of that report were some of the pressures that parents, guardians, caregivers were feeling with a really hard entry point in grade 1, having to make a decision. Some of the social dynamics in communities where they felt they would have kept their students in an English program, but when 12 of the other kids on the street are all going to French immersion, they just felt they had to make that decision early on. What we're looking to do by offering a dual track programming predominantly across the district, again with a handful of English only and French immersion sites, is to try to provide greater opportunity of equity of access to both official languages, which we heard in spades. We have a significant number of parents and guardians, close to a third, who prefer English programming. Ultimately, what would be the enhanced English program, and about 2/3 of our parents who prefer the French immersion. What we're looking to do as staff, as a priority, is to ensure that we don't create two solitudes, as has been in the case in the past. And there's a significant portion of every single day that would provide an opportunity for students to be combined. Mathematics is a good example as a subject area or discipline. English language arts is another one, commonly just called English, but I know we confuse English as a subject with English as a language. So English language arts is another opportunity, in addition to a priority focus on ensuring we keep community schools together and students together. So as I've said in the past, what we're proposing as a program model is not a perfect model. It's looking at addressing some of the very issues that Trustee Lyra is talking about and that have been spoken to at this table for quite truly decades on that front. Our attempt as staff is looking to offer both of those program options to all of our students to the greatest extent possible, and then working diligently in the coordination of timetabling, scheduling, school grade configurations that are simplified to try and ensure that students stay together and have opportunities to be together across the both of those programs. So a work in progress, no doubt, for us, but we feel on balance that we're honoring what we're hearing from our parents and guardians by offering a dual track program across our system.
I'm really glad that you talked about the dual track sites in the early English in grades 1, 2, 3 and math in grades 1, 2, 3. The report that you have given us says at dual track sites, students in the EE and FI programs may be combined during their English and or math blocks if as appropriate and feasible. I'm wondering if we can go out with stronger language during this consultation, if we can commit that we will be integrating these classes at the primary level, because if we're going out to consult, I think we should be asking questions. And one of them I would like to know the answer to is, can we as a district commit to integrating those classes?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm looking for, from a governance perspective, sort of the most optimal response. Every one of our schools has a different number of students in it. Right now, we've got an array of school configurations. We're trying to simplify that to get to greater predictability around what you're talking about, Trustee Lyra. It could be, though, that if you were in a French immersion class and I was in an English one, we were combined for math. It could be that in the very next block of the day that Trustee Jennekins and I might be together for English language as opposed to math. There might be variations of that. And already currently, we don't have a cookie cutter scheduling and timetabling approach. We are looking on an operational front, again, to standardize the blocks of time at every site at the elementary level for a balanced school day, which isn't currently the case. All of those factors, and there's just a few to mention, but all those factors we feel on balance, not to mention the regrouping of our timetabling in 60-minute blocks as opposed to 40-minute blocks, will add to greater opportunity to do what I'm talking about. But to tell you right now at every single site that I can assure that you and I would be together for math or for that, I can't do that. We are striving to do what we've put in that plan.
My concern is that we will end up with 2 siloed programs at many sites where it was deemed hard or not worth the juice, or the juice was not worth the squeeze. And I think that undermines the purpose of trying to create this integrated program. And so I don't know if we need to make it a directive or if we need to make it a requirement or what needs to be done, but I don't want to see administrators, principals just say, it was hard, we decided not to do it because now we have siloed programs, and that doesn't resolve the issues that I've been talking about related to success of the English program. So I'm going to go back to you and then
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's a valid point. What we're looking to do as staff is to create the conditions and infrastructure that make it easier. It's not easy because there's a number of factors that our administrators need to take into consideration. I also want to make sure that part of the juice or the squeeze is the fact that we are in spirit as an overarching principle bringing students back to their community schools to allow communities to really mobilize, not only, quite frankly, in English language arts or mathematics, but in school-based activities and events. It is a different approach than what's happening right now, where quite clearly, Trustee Lyra, we take all the French immersion kids from a given community and move them way over here. That is creating part of the issues we have. We will continue to have equity-related issues as an organization. We're trying to lower the slope on that, and some of what we've got going on as infrastructure right now exacerbates the very issue you're trying to get to.
Okay. I've got a couple of quick yes/no questions, and I know I'm going to be dancing near the line on the in-camera issue, so if you can't answer something, just say no, and then tell me which section is closed under in-camera. Make sense? Yes? Okay. So my first question is about the last sentence in paragraph 6C, where it says that the Minister of Education, the discussions with representatives of the Minister of Education to ensure alignment between any proposed options being considered and the expectations or requirements. Were you the one having those meetings?
Yes.
Were they, is there a statement in writing from the ministry saying we cannot run a single French immersion program?
Through you, Madam Chair, what the Ministry of Education has indicated is that the legislation for English language school boards was constructed and interpreted to always be able to offer English language. What they didn't envision, and I think, I'll be honest with the Board of Trustees and the public, we often claim we're unique in a lot of ways. I don't think we are in a lot of ways. I think we're a lot like most other boards. But in what I'm about to say next, I think we are unique. We are in a part of the province where dynamic bilingualism is not only desired, it's omnipresent. On TV stations, on the radio, sports teams, you name it, we're looking out our windows at times and seeing a context of a bilingualism in two adjacent provinces. There is still an expectation on the ministry's part that English language school boards offer English, that there was never a vision that French immersion programming would be so popular that it would threaten the existence of English language. And I want to be clear, I want to put all of that aside. That is the interpretation we received in our consultations, not only myself, members of staff, but yes, I've been present at many of those. I also want to make clear that we're not talking about small numbers of people who want English programming. Close to 1/3 of the parents, guardians, and caregivers in this district would like English programming. 2/3 would like French immersion programming. Both of those numbers are significant, and we're honoring both of those by offering a dual track system. What we will look to do as staff over time is to ebb and flow the number of English-only sites or French immersion sites to ensure that we've got viable English and French programming. If in 3 years our parents and guardians want enhanced English, we'll shift the number of English language only, English programming sites only, or the other way around to ensure that programming stays viable. That's why I'm very comfortable as Director of Education with our approach to date. The vast majority of our schools bringing students back to their communities, offering dual track programming with a handful of English-only sites and French immersion sites where it made real sense based on planning to do so. So I would say beyond a technical approach from the ministry, we've got a public that also wants to see enhanced English programming.
So it is your opinion the minister has prohibited the board from making a decision to only have French immersion?
So through you, Madam Chair, again, staff responds to a Board of Trustees, but also responds to a Ministry of Education. We've had a clear indication from the ministry that it's an expectation that English language school boards offer English language programming in amongst other offerings, as indicated in point 6C as you've outlined.
Did we consider a model closer to the Catholic board where they have an English program at the start and then a split model in the middle as a way to address the failings of our English program? And I can see the timer, so I'll come back on the list.
Through you, Madam Chair, the staff looked at a number of options. One of the things, and again, in the feedback we received, not only do a third of our parents look for English programming, 2/3 of our parents look for an early entry to immersion. It's a very important program we offer. You can see by the proposal we've got in front of you that staff genuinely feels we've honored the perspectives of the wide array of our parents and guardians. There's no question there's a few programs here that are proposed to discontinue, but we think we're covering on balance the array of feedback that we've gotten. So all to say, staff looked at a number of different potential options and also have looked at the confidence, competence, proficiency, and achievement of our students in an FSL capacity, be it core French or immersion, to put the proposal that's in front of you.
All right, we're going to continue down our speakers list. So we have Trustee Nash, then Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'll come back to the alternative program. I was wondering if actually something de facto that happen in the constituency of the students that we see in our alternative program is parents looking for options because in their community school, it didn't fit the needs of their child, and so they looked at the alternative model. This all brings to us that right now within our alternative schools, we have a number of children that have special needs. And have we given consideration to that transition to these students, like that, because a number of them do have education plans and have special needs. So just sending them back to their community school without having a plan may not be the best thing for them.
I'll begin and then Superintendent Stout will jump in quickly and correct me. I think it's important to remember that, the students with those kinds of needs and learning profiles already exist in all of our schools and are generally well served, and that there are no particular program enhancements or staffing enhancements at those alternate programs that would support a different kind of service model. Yes, there are some differences in terms of the culture and the climate of the school and how the attendance might affect things, but in terms of the day-to-day support for a learner with special education needs, they would essentially be receiving the same, competent staff with similar training and a similar understanding of how best to meet those needs and ensure that IEP is followed and modified. I don't know if you have anything to.
I would only add that every IEP, as part of every IEP, there's a transition plan. And so I think we'd have to be really thoughtful about those students who do have those IEPs, and that transition plan is thought through and thorough and worked on with the family and consideration of how to best support the student through that transition.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Nash. Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just very quickly, I just wanted to touch back on Director had mentioned the two solitudes that we don't want to have at end. I think Trustee Lyra was also referring to this these silos. But one thing that we haven't touched on at all tonight is the resource gaps that do exist in terms of wealth between some areas and others. And while what we're proposing will help to ensure some diversity within schools, because we're not going to just have people skipping over school A to go to school B, we aren't talking at all about the differences in resources, the parents who are available to be part of school councils, the schools that are able to fundraise where others aren't. So we will still have some disparities. How are we going to address that? And that is something that exists, whatever model we choose, but how are we going to address that?
I think you're spot on, Trustee Kaplan-Murth. We're going to have that to a certain extent. We do feel the current infrastructure really exacerbates that. We are creating profiles of schools because of program choice right now that really stretches that and increases the slope, so to speak, of equity. We think the infrastructural piece will help balance that slope to a certain extent, but we also do need other decision-making processes happening well beyond what's proposed here. And this plan only speaks to a program model and associated supports. We've got other equity-related issues we have to get to. One of the ones that we've talked about as a senior staff has been, would we have a more systemic approach to how school communities raise funds, where they raise funds for themselves, but they knowingly raise funds for, say, other communities who might be less fortunate than them. And you have to be transparent and upfront about that. You've got to be clear about the reasons why you're collecting money. And we've got versions of that already helping various, lean on Associate Director Reynolds here around Kids Helping Kids, or, various initiatives like that. We'd look to, we've talked about looking to do that more and more because we're seeing, Trustee Kaplan-Murth, the impact on society of higher costs, period. And that's playing out in a number of areas, including lunch. And I'll just give you one example. It used to be the case that you could buy fruits and vegetables cheaper than you could a can of Coke and a bag of chips. And now that's flipped on us. And we're seeing the impact in our schools that in some cases it's cheaper to buy some of the items. And no, we're not placing judgment on families and conditions. We understand full well. We've talked about it tonight, how our resources are stretched. We know that's the case for families, but it's those types of initiatives well beyond what we're proposing here that we're going to need to keep working on. To your very point, we're not going to solve every equity issue we face. We're trying to optimize our resources to address them and minimize that slope.
Trustee Kaplan-Meier, just to confirm?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. And then I did see Trustee Scott raise her hand, so we're going to go to Trustee Scott, and then we're going to go to Chris and Anthony online, and then Trustee Lara.
Thank you. I just wanted to address some of the concerns that have been raised in terms of how manageable it will be to move towards a more inclusive model for our special education students. As some of you are aware, I've been involved with public education for quite a while, and one of the things that I've observed is that the philosophical approach and culture in schools and in school districts has a huge impact on how they operate when it comes to managing whatever batch of kids happen to be registered in that school. One of the things that was very clear was that our predecessor boards had very different approaches to dealing with high needs students. In one, there was a huge concentration of special needs classes, and it was very easy, frankly, for a teacher to sort of say, this student really should be somebody else's problem. In the other board, that just wasn't a feasible thing because of the geography. And it was really important to find a way to serve kids in their community school because there was no way to get them anywhere else without an incredibly long and expensive transportation plan. And so what you did end up with would be a mixture of different abilities and disabilities, sometimes organized into a specialized class. But the thing was that the whole school had a tendency to wrap their arms around all of the kids and say, these are our kids. They weren't kids that you would give away to somebody else. That was the philosophy within the school, that they were our kids. And when somebody had to go away, because they really did need and would benefit from a special class that was accessible, they went there and they were welcomed back to their home school as soon as they possibly could be returned. I think that what we need to do is to try to rethink, because as the OCDSB has sort of amalgamated those two concepts into our current practice, I think what we want to do is to think how we can modify that going forward to pull together the need for intensive support when students require it, at the same time as we are pulling together the concept of the school as a family where all of the kids belong to all of the teachers and staff within the school. And I think that really
Trustee
is the crux
Scott.
of what we're dealing with here, is to make the cultural shift.
Thank you very much. I can see nodding heads from staff around the table, so I think the comments were greatly appreciated. We are going to continue down our speakers list. So we have Anthony, and then we have Chris, and then we have Lyra. And just a reminder, folks, the 10:30 vote is coming up quick, and it would be great if we could get to this recommendation tonight.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
We
all
can
right.
hear you. Yeah.
Going back to my earlier, yep, okay. So another challenge with implementing this project and program leader is the training of teachers, the capacity of the teachers in terms of regarding special education is whether they're able to, not in terms of the inclusive resource teachers that are applied to the network from the LSS, but the regular teachers themselves. Whether it be PD day, the capacity of PD days to train them, and whether there's enough of that PD days to provide that special education training as full as they are already. And then second, for those existing teachers, and then second, teachers coming in through the training program, through their bachelor's of education, whether they have the required training for special education, which is highly questionable with the already loaded programs that they have. So this requires a heavy look at and advocacy. Then moving on, a question regarding Trustee Lyra. I have other ones that I want to go back to, but Trustee Lyra mentioned about the French immersion. I have a question about why don't we have enhanced French immersion? So what we have the French immersion, which is at 40/60, but why don't we have enhanced French immersion in the context of through you, the chair?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Anthony, for the comments. I'll look to staff for some of the ones around training for special education. Just a comment around the two programs, French immersion and enhanced English. We do acknowledge, much like our commentary on how valuable the tenets of alternative have been in moving the whole system forward, we do acknowledge in a French immersion capacity, the nature of the students in French immersion are not those when the program was initially envisioned 40 to 50 years ago. At the time, for predominantly white students of affluent families who had a solid foundation in the English language and were looking to acquire another language. Now, that's a generalization, but I think you understand the spirit of my comment. I know every student was different back then, and every student's different now. The students of now are much more diverse. They're not only learning French, they're acquiring English, and they're learning Arabic and a whole series of other beautiful languages that are part of their background or their culture, their experience level. And so we've come to realize that in the offering of our programs, we have to ensure that we're growing both of those languages in that capacity. And I think to some of the points that Lily had mentioned earlier, we have some indigenous courses that we're offering to our students. So all to say, we look to provide a balance of French and English to the best of our ability as staff. Could there be an argument, had a great conversation, constructive conversation with Canadian parents for French earlier today? You know, if we're offering 60%, they'd love it to be 61, 81, and 101. And I get totally why they're advocating for more French and why those who are looking to ensure we're serving our students in the English language, we're advocating for more English. I think all of those are valid advocacy pieces. We've tried to land a model that we've prepared for you that is sensible, balances subject areas, disciplines, keeps the learning trajectory through for those students who wish to continue it, and at the end of the day, provides confidence, proficiency, and achievement in both of our official languages and for our students of Indigenous origin, of course, other language offerings that we will continue to build over time. So I think it's a valid point, but we're looking to be as responsible as we can, balancing all of the needs that have been brought to our attention. And I'll turn it over to staff for some of the training around whether it's in general or special needs, and I apologize, I may have lost some track.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. You know, really great questions and really great points in terms of making sure that we're building staff capacity to support the needs of all of our students, especially those with special education needs. What I can say is that the LSS department and program services have just continued to increase our collaboration and working together to make sure that the professional development we offer has embedded within it strategies that are going to be effective, especially for special education students. And those would be on our professional learning days. Those are limited days throughout the year, but we also embed that learning throughout the year when we pull networks together. So we may pull a small group of staff together from 5 or 6 different schools at a time to build that capacity that way. But that learning is foundational to the professional development that we provide for our staff throughout the district.
Anthony, please go ahead.
Okay, and then thank you for that. In terms of going through the special SPCs being phased out, rather than looking at it being a challenge or obstacle in terms of bringing them into an inclusive environment, looking at it as an opportunity of improving them further is through like a lens of total quality service management, of lean management, cause and effect analysis, like looking at benchmarking through the very best. I believe you're already doing it, but pushing the envelope further of best practices internationally, North American, and adapted locally to the particular here Ottawa environment. Like even say, for example, here, just for a very specific, where I'm more familiar with, gifted, for example, is you have children that are, and this is specifically the very small, the smallest cohort is one class, but you have kids that are a teacher will never see once in their lifetime. A principal may even see once in their lifetime a student that's so gifted and that deserves an opportunity. So how do you, that's like a university level at the age of 4 or 5 for certain subjects. How do you deal with that? And how do you promote that?
And Anthony, I can see that we are over time and I have the director sitting to my right, which would be your left on the screen. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads and he's going to want to get back to you to have a further conversation about that because it is such an important point. But I'm not sure I happy to take emails, but I'm not sure we have the answer for that specific question on hand right now. And we're going to continue down our speakers list. So Chris, please go ahead.
Thank you again, Chair, and through you, acknowledging that the time restraints we're under, I'll just bring one other point forward. And, we have spoken about our academic changes and, the phasing out of the SPC classes and our continuum of inclusion. And what is not in the elementary program review is a plan to address either our current levels of violence that's in the classrooms, or our anticipated, levels of increased violence as a potential as a result of students being dysregulated in moving sites and whatnot. And I do bring this up and I bring it forward because once again, it is one of the single most issues that our members bring to us on a daily basis. And so it's just more of a question and perhaps if, can the action plan that's coming out after consultations and the risk assessment, will these include a plan to include this or to address this, post the consultation period? And just referencing what Trustee Bell mentioned, that people should see their feedback incorporated into that report. So I would like to just sort of put that forward to staff and the director. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the director, that's noted, Chris. I think, some of those pieces are going to be more in an implementation plan after we go through consultation and after decisions made in terms of what needs to be in place in order to ensure that this rolls out smoothly if we get there. But your comments are heard.
All right, and then last on my speakers list, I have Trustee Lyra and then back to Trustee Scott for a wrap up, since Trustee Scott is the one that moved the recommendations.
Okay. I'm going to shift from being critical of the struggles the English program is likely to face and focus on a number of other things. I wanted to talk quickly about grandfathering. I think as soon as we highlight what students are likely to move and where programs can end in which schools, we're going to hear a great deal from families about grandfathering their oldest kid, all their kids, the one who is graduating a year from now. Can we speak to what has been considered in terms of grandfathering that we can do or we can't do?
Through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate Trustee Lyra's comment, and I think it's a genuine query that any parent, guardian, or caregiver had. What I can say is that through Associate Director Giroux and his team in the planning department, General Manager Ostafchuk, they are working on that right now. Area by area, zone by zone. I do know in speaking to both our Associate Director and Manager Ostafchuk that they're trying their very best to make as sensible decisions as we can, as seamless transitions as we can. But there is some movement that will be required in a process such as this. And we're not in a position physically, operationally, or fiscally to grandfather every single student in their current space through to the end of that particular context for them. And I will remind the Board of Trustees and the public, we move every single year thousands of kids already. This is not any different than what we do currently, and what we're striving for longer term is actually less movement. We do too much movement right now. So we're looking at a one-time move that is not going to be easy for us, but that we need to actually reduce the very problem that I think you're addressing in the query. We'll do the best we can, and the report in March will look to bring greater detail to the Board of Trustees, and staff is working on it quite literally 24/7.
So the reason I ask is I'm trying to specifically avoid a student who moves one school in grade 5, a new school in grade 6 because we moved them, and then a new school again in grade 7, and then a new school again in grade 9, because that is going to be 5 schools in 4 years, and that is unreasonable. And so I'm wondering if we can take a special look at students who are going to who are hitting a natural break point and wouldn't otherwise be moving. So I guess that's my ask on the grandfathering front. Can we look at that?
Absolutely. That's very much in the conversation for us, where we've got those quirky kind of scenarios to try and minimize that. We've got our planning team making every possible effort. Absolutely.
Okay. In reading the report, I'm seeking a little bit of clarity. When you say in grade 3 is the last time you can move into the French program, does that mean the summer between grade 3 and grade 4? Does that mean Christmas break in the middle of grade 3? Does that mean March break? Like, what is the last day you have to make that choice?
I apologize. We'll make that clear. If it's not clear, the fact you're asking, it's not clear, it's going into your grade 3 year. It's going into your grade 3 year.
Okay,
So
the summer between grades 2 and 3
Correct.
is the last
Correct.
time. Okay.
Correct. In order to accumulate the hours required for immersion, amongst other factors, including so much gap and separation between students who may have entered in grade 1, we don't want to make an impossible scenario for our staff and otherwise.
Okay. That is very helpful. I have a comment about a response to a number of comments that were made earlier. Trustees Nash, Jennings, and Dixon all talked about the importance of a risk analysis, and I appreciate the importance of a risk analysis. I am concerned that if we elongate this program, this review unnecessarily, we're going to create undue chaos in the public's eye about where the school boundaries might be, which school they might go to. I know that we have people who choose where they live, who choose which jobs they take based on which schools their kids will go to. And if we have an extended multi-year period where the boundaries might change, might not, I think we will create undue chaos. So I am in favor of the timeline as presented and not extending it unnecessarily for anything. So I guess that's a general response, because I appreciate that risk analysis, and I appreciate the concerns that are raised, but I also really don't want to just drag this out. Particularly, I don't want to drag it out over a trustee election, because I really don't want to see a new crop of trustees pop up and say, actually, we're tearing up the last 4 years of work, because that would be heartbreaking. And then I had a question about OCV that I think has been answered, but I'm going to double check. The OCV is going to be offered to anybody in our jurisdiction in both of the programs.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I have to thank my senior team on so many fronts. This is another one. Right now, we're working through the request for OCV, carrying it on for an additional year, it looks like, next year, and then looking at where the program options land, the proposed model, and then looking to apply a lens around those parents, guardian caregivers who are looking for a virtual option. So all to say, it's on our radar. We're looking to continue into the upcoming school year, but there may be some adjustments. Ideally, it would mirror what we're offering in the in-person setting, so that a student who might go virtual for a year or two could seamlessly enter into our programming. So all to say, you know, it's a factor we're looking at, and we're looking at doing what it is that we've just described.
Okay. You and I have spoken about a shift in culture to move away from teachers or parents pushing their kids into the English program because they don't think that their child can do French immersion because of special education, et cetera. What tangible actions do you intend to take to change the culture at the OCDSB to prevent us from having that streaming or that pushing into the English program?
From my perspective, as Director of Education, 2 points. One, I am inspired by what I'm hearing from our staff. They're raising valid concerns, but they're also acknowledging the importance of doing the very work we're at here this evening. I think our staff are talented, dedicated people who understand that dynamic. There are a few things I think we can put in place at a system level. One is some checks and balances before students move. Sometimes parents and guardians choose that of their own accord. We'll honor that. It's their choice. But from an educator perspective, we'll look to put in some systemic advice, support before a decision is made, so that it's not a rash decision, or it's not a decision that feeds some of the trends that speak to the concerns you're raising. So we haven't worked that out. I'll work with Superintendent Laverne and Associate Director Reynolds and other members of the team, including Superintendent Stout, to make sure we've got some systemic guidelines in place to help educators with that, so that it's not a screening out that maybe is unfairly characterizing the past, but I understand the spirit of what you're saying, and we're looking at it.
All right. Thank you, Director. And I look forward to seeing those tangible pieces come forwards.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a very fruitful discussion tonight, and I know we could all around this table continue the discussion, and we really would love to answer more questions. With that said, this is approving the consultation plan tonight. So Mr. Wong, I have the director, like I said, sitting beside me, and he's committed to following up with you tomorrow to start addressing some of the items, but with the 10:30 vote coming up quickly, we are going to hand it back to Trustee Scott for wrap up, with the understanding that what we are approving tonight, or we are bringing forward to vote, I should not say that is approved, is the consultation plan, so that we can continue having these excellent conversations around the table and with our community. So I'm going to hand it back over to Trustee Scott for wrap up.
Thank you. I have no wrap up, but I do have one quick question, and that is, if we approve this motion in committee this evening, when will the complete schedule of consultation meetings with dates be posted on the website, so that everybody can start planning for when they want to participate, even if they all have tentative attached to them until the day that the board actually approves the final recommendation, which will be next week, I guess?
Through you, Madam Chair, with the permission of the board, as soon as tomorrow, staff could at least share what dates we have tentatively scheduled. And I say that because February and March are busy to begin with, and we're needing to find open nights to actually fit consultations in. I'm just looking at staff in case I'm misspeaking, but if it were the will of the board and this was approved in principle tonight, we know we have to wait until the 28th of board to begin, but we could post as of tomorrow with tentative on it, the dates to date that we've lined up, and there are some still to be figured out, but we'll share the ones that we have.
Thank you for that. I have no further wrap up.
All right, so I'm going to be calling the vote. So we are voting on that the consultation plan for an active community engagement campaign to take place during winter 2025 regarding the proposed program model and support for students as outlined in report 25-002 be approved. All those in favor? And there are 0 opposed and 3 absent, so that carries. So I can say on behalf of everyone around the table, we're very excited to start this consultation. We're going to continue down for a few agenda items, but we will be calling the 10:30 vote. So I'm going to look to Trustee Scott and Jenkins if there's anything they would like to highlight from OPSPA. All right, and then I'm going to look to Trustee Lyra. Is there anything that you would like to highlight on behalf of OSTA?
The OSTA meeting was canceled this month.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that. We are moving on to new business. Is there any new business that we are going to be flagging tonight? I am seeing none, so I now declare this meeting adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.